Hey there guys, how's it going? My name is Suman Chatterjee from the Flow Zone Academy and I'm a flow state coach, which means that I help you feel better and perform better. Today I want to speak to you guys about validation, okay? We always seek validation externally, but it's about exploring it internally. Now I've had a lot of issues with this in my own life. Earlier on when I was creating my brand, it was mainly all about me. It was called Coaching with Zoom. And there's nothing wrong with that, it's like starting a brand called, Tim's Jewelry or whatever. There is a certain paradigm associated with that though, which is not a transcendent one, right? It's all about me as the practitioner, me doing this thing. Whereas if you're creating a movement or a brand, it's really different about what is the main mission, what is the main message that you're giving out, right? And so I think that when we think of validation, look at the word itself, right? It has the word valid in it. What happens when something is not valid? Well, it comes back to owning your truth, right? So when you require something outside of you to give you that feeling of truth and validity, it's like a verification, right? It's like, the blue check mark, but in real life. Like, do you give yourself a blue check mark in your real life, not just on Twitter or all these social medias, right? Because we can bring up the idea of social media into a little bit of depth on how we see people and understand that sometimes a lot of what they explore with different themes that they're talking about is definitely curated. And that's okay to curate content, but it's not coming from an honest, valid place. You see what I'm saying? So in order for you to actually receive validation, you must first give yourself the validation to allow yourself and to give yourself the respect and the permission to be who you truly are, online and offline. That's number one. Number two is, oftentimes we self-identify as someone who is seeking validation. Even if we're not doing it as much, or maybe it's just a tendency or an inclination, we say that, I'm just seeking approval. I'm an approval seeker. I'm a people pleaser. Okay, now that you're aware of that, let's step out of that frame. Right? Because the label is just there for you to understand it, right? If I go to the supermarket, I'm there to understand, okay, there's a label that says, okay, set of peas. Now I know it's a set of peas. Now I can use those peas to cook with or put it in a salad or whatever. If I didn't have the label, I'd be looking for the peas, like, where are the peas? There's no image with any peas on here. They're just all cans, and I don't know what the label is saying, so there's no kind of surface or appearance telling me that I can trust in this thing, right? And so I feel that sometimes we judge people based on that first instance or their first impression at times. And that's human nature. You got to understand that. That's what we're conditioned into. Right? So there's certain kids growing up where they get a lot more attention and they get a lot more importance growing up, as opposed to maybe another kid who hasn't been getting that. So it is your job to now give that to yourself. You see, a lot of validation comes into inner child work and inner child healing. That's why I have a picture of myself as a kid, going like this. Why do I have that picture there? It's so I can connect with it and give that child attention, love, compassion that it was missing. And maybe it wasn't missing all of those things to a great extent, but maybe it was missing it to certain extents. So maybe a percentage of it in that child's world was missing. And if you could sit with your child's self during any kind of incidents that might have happened, maybe you were bullied, maybe there was a trauma, whatever that was, can you afterwards, after the event, the bad thing happened, the teacher scolded you, can you be with your younger self and give them the love that they needed? Can you be with your younger self and be like, oh, hey, I'm here for you, man. I've got you. You have nothing to worry about. Life will be tough, but you will grow into becoming a strong man or strong woman, if you're a woman watching this, right? Really start to understand that your connection with your inner child is so important that you don't seek that validation outside. Because if you look at every single movie that you're watching, just notice all the characters are doing is that they're just coming back to themselves, right? They go on this epic journey, but then all that journey is doing is just making them come back to the self. And this is why it's so important to also recognize that all love is self-love, all hate is self-hate, all trust is self-trust, all relation is self-relation. And to really understand that projection and that mirror of doing the work and leaning into what we feel like is the uncomfortable thing. Because that is what will blossom into an epic personality. If we choose to avoid things and only minimize the bad and, maximize the good in ourselves, that's great, but the bad is still ruminating, right? It's still there in the background. It's like a radiator hum of uncertainty, anxiety, tension. So instead of that radiator hum needs to become louder, right? So we can hear it more. And then once we can hear it more, we can figure out, oh, okay, I need to tweak this and this so that the radiator is fixed a little bit and the hum isn't happening so loud anymore. But you've got to first turn on the sound of it to really hear it and understand it. Once we exaggerate it, once we blow it out of proportion, then we can get much more of an understanding of it. It's only when it's very subtle or it's very soft or it's a little tiny nudge that we get confused. We're like, what is that thing? I don't know. I'm going to get out the microscope, right? I'm going to look at this thing. I'm going to try to do it, but I can't really tell what it is. I kind of have some ideas, but this is why working with a practitioner or a therapist or a healer or anybody for that matter, even a friend or a parent or a counselor, if you can do this inner work with yourself or with them, it will start to reveal to you certain things which you've kept trapped or you've held on to for a while, which you haven't processed. But once it goes through the processing unit, then it's like, oh, now I know what to do with this. Now it seems like I have a healthy understanding of myself. You see, I always talk about giving yourself internal notifications before you give yourself external. Okay? So external people might like your post or whatever, you did something great, they might like it. Oh, I just got into university. I'm proud to say that I got into... People like those posts, automatically. They're going to like it. It's like, yeah, hey, you did a great thing. That's awesome. I'm going to like it. Also, it's like somebody's birthday. It's recommended, right? It's like, hey, you got to wish them happy birthday, right? It becomes a norm. And so a lot of the times we feel like, oh yeah, I guess I love myself. Sure. That's the right thing to do, I guess. Like maybe self-love is the way. Right? Whereas you're actually hating yourself inside. So, what are you going to do about that? That's my question. Because I have a feminine energy that wants to explore and like flow with it and be there and like be creative and be expansive and just be radiant. But then there's another side of it where I've got to give myself a limit. I've got to understand my boundary. I've got to understand the container. And I've got to be the type of person that leans into my edge. So this is what validation does. It's like, once you truly feel like, yeah, I have the verification mark, I have the check mark inside of me, I have the self-love, I have the pride, okay? And that's not an arrogance or a conceited pride, right? It's a knowingness. It's a deep truth and profound realization that I am one with everything and I am at one with my true nature and myself. And once you know yourself, then you start to know others as well. You can know the world without leaving your home. You might have heard it from mystics or sages or all this kind of stuff and understand that it's an internal process, but what exactly does that mean? It's a tuning in, and it's an amplification of the awareness that you have. So once you can amplify your awareness, then you can understand it better, and then you can take power and consolidate it and integrate it within your beingness. But before, if you have some vague idea of it, you can't do anything with that. I call it being an internal chameleon. Right? That's a concept that I came up with where you don't match into the external world. You start to create the vibration or the frequency or the feeling inside that resonates to the outside, and not let the outside determine your inside. But what the outside is also giving you is stuff to look at inside, okay? So there's a lot of paradox to this thing, and I understand it can be a little bit confusing. So I'm aware of that. But at the same time, you know that it's confusing, and you can make yourself more confused by looking around, by tapping your foot in a really nervous way. You can get even more confused by giving yourself even more things to learn on that thing, where it can be very simplified, but you choose to add so much complexity that it gets overwhelming. And a lot of the time, the overwhelm is just like, I have to learn to embrace that, and how can I now use it instead of being afraid of it? Because if you're coming from the frequency of fear, and you understand the human nature of, seeking understanding and being a social person, feeling like you belong, So, what I want this video to really state at the end of it is the fact that self-acceptance is that self-validation. So if you want external validation, you have to start being more accepting of others and yourself, and really, really speak your truth and not be afraid of the judgment that you receive, because the judgment that you receive is clearly you are triggering people based on the internal work that they haven't done yet. So you're getting all these people. If you hate a hater, their haterness will be more. And then they have an identity to fight back. They're in a fight and you're triggering a part of them which is fighting themselves. So instead of looking at this thing like, oh man, this is a problem, learn to love it. Learn to find the opportunity in it. Learn to train to look for the solution. We know something, but our nervous system doesn't know. Like, you probably know this information, but your nervous system doesn't know it because you haven't been training your subconscious mind to receive it and actually put it into practice. The only thing you're scared of is just a thought. If you're at a low vibration, you're just this kind of used car salesman, right? Imagine if you're supposed to be a giant, like you're wearing little kid clothes, right? Or if you're a senior in college, but you're living like you're in preschool, all right? That's what you're doing to yourself, but you're not validating yourself. You're treating yourself smaller than you actually are, whereas you need to expand greater than you think you are. Go beyond. The thing is here, sky's the limit. Why only the sky? The universe is the limit. Think of infinite expansion. Don't let people put you into a smaller and smaller and smaller box until you get super and super and super specific either. Because it's about zooming in and zooming out. So it's about the knowingness and the pacing and the timing and the understanding and the calibration of knowing when to zoom out and when to zoom in. Validating that part of us within ourselves that feels like is unloved. To love the parts of ourselves that are unlovable. And that's the deep work. If you say, but I'm just a jealous person, I've always been like that and it's my horoscope and this. If you keep believing in that old paradigm and that old story, like that's a story as well, that you're the jealous type. And you're buying into that story and you're paying the writer, which is yourself, to keep writing the story. Because you're interested in knowing what to find out about it because you're addicted to the feeling of it. So why are you addicted to the feeling of it? That's the work too. It's like, why are you addicted to the validation? What does the validation give you? It gives me a feeling of acceptance. It gives me a feeling of love. It makes me feel respected. All right, why not feel all of that already? So I'll leave this video here. I hope you have an amazing day. May the flow be with you and stay legendary.